So before we go on to the last presentation, which is my own, I'd like to invite Jürgen Fries, who is the Chief Services Officer of Etsy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for the opportunity to hand over to you our recognition of long-standing cooperation. You heard from Jonas earlier. It started with as a service provider with Furapolis. Later on, we had a good cooperation agreement. We look forward to pursue our cooperation. So please accept this certificate to congratulate you on the occasion of the celebration of the 10th anniversary. And again, together with that, a small gift from our local glass art shop in Biot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So this is a recognition and a gift to OMA, and OMA very much appreciates, Jürgen, the support we've received from Furapolis and Etsy's providing those services. I remember in the early days when we were very much looking at how would we support the procedures, how would we support our website. When we were created, we didn't have those. I remember even when we came to organizing the meetings, I remember sitting with my TP vice chairs. We were working at how to support the Wi-Fi meetings. This wasn't what was needed to be done by the TP officers, but we didn't have any support. So luckily, when we got to 2003, and we eventually had the Furapolis support, it was an amazing change. Suddenly we had a website, members could upload and download documents. We had a document support office, as was subsequently called, to facilitate the working groups. It was a migrational change. It was a significant change. And without that support, I don't think we would achieve what we have done. So, Jürgen, on behalf of OMA, thank you very much. So, from the two former chairmen, Jari and Fred, on to me, the current OMA chairman. And I feel as if I do have a lot of responsibility to follow in the footsteps of the two former chairmen. Just as the original TP chair, there was a lot which I had to do to help the organization run and support the working groups. I'm sure Jari and subsequently Fred had similar problems. They effectively had to kickstart the organization, organize the structure, help people to understand the working model, motivate people, help them go in the right direction. It's very hard work. So it's amazing that we've achieved that. So let's go through this presentation, which I hope you appreciate. So when we were created in 2002, before 2002, there was an area, we can't see the subject line, the headings, which is a disappointment, but when we were, before 2002, there was a huge vacuum, as was being pointed out by some of our previous presenters. We had a situation where the end users and the operators, not carriers, Philippe, the operators were demanding services. We had the infrastructure, but we didn't have the services which the users wanted, the information, the access. So it was very, very disappointing. That resulted in a vacuum. And as a consequence of that vacuum, it became apparent that we needed to move forward from that. So this wasn't really surprising, given the situation of technology in pre-2002. We had low bandwidth in our networks. There was a serious lack of interoperability, not only inter-device, but also between devices, between networks, between even the infrastructure and devices themselves in some cases. And there was little standardization in terms of services. The industry was screaming out to have that. So what then happened was that we saw that it wasn't just the services support that was fragmented, it was also the standards ecosystem when it came to supporting those services, which was in a similar broken state. So 2002, time for a change. And OMA was created through discussions, and we heard some of the late-night sessions in the Savoy Hotel in London being referred to. OMA was created, and it had the direct intention to address this vacuum of services. And what we identified as our vision was, and I'll read this, but I won't read everything else, no matter what device I have, no matter what service I want, no matter what carrier or network, sorry, Philippe, I'm using, I can communicate, access, and exchange information. And that was the vision of OMA, and it is still valid today. So 10 plus years on, that is still valid. And as an end user, you want access to your services. It doesn't matter whether you're using a smartphone, a feature phone, a tablet, or your PC on the desk, or using one in the airport. You want the same access to the services that you love and enjoy. So OMA was created, and what this addressed was a significant change. I referred to the previous slide to the fragmentation we had across the various standards organizations. But that fragmentation had more impact as well, because each of the standards organization had their own IPR rules, they had their own processes, they had their own procedures, they had their own rules, they had their own fees, they had their own meeting schedules, they had their own travel schedule. It was somewhat chaotic, to say the least. So OMA allowed all the related services standardization work to take place in one venue under one big tent, as the term was used at the time. We had one single IPR policy for the entire related standards services support. We introduced use cases, which in some cases is unheard of. In other words, don't just standardize for the sake of standardizing, as we heard before, but we were identifying use cases, and from that, then developing the standards that we needed. We were striving for a common architecture. Not sure we achieved that yet, but we were striving for a common architecture. And also we had developed our own processes and procedures, which were consistent across the working groups, so that everybody knew how to develop the standards we were working on. We also had a drive, as identified in the OMA vision, to have interoperability. Interoperability was at the core and essence of all our standards. And through that, we had also a testing regime to prove the interoperability of the specifications we had created. And just to perhaps conflict with Mike and some of his figures, or perhaps even challenge you, and I'll provide the answers at the same time, over our 10 years of existence, we've had over 120,000 technical contributions from members, 120,000. That's a huge figure. It's a rate of 1,000 a month if you work it out. And all of these are contributed by members who diligently work and slavishly do so in the late hours or early hours of the morning when they attend these meetings. And as a consequence of this, we've had close to 200 individual enabler specifications which we've had ratified by the board. And as was being pointed out in one of our previous presentations, you'll find that many devices which exist contain an element to some extent of our OMA enablers therein to help support the services. This is an excellent achievement. But our greatest achievement, and I'm sure what's coming up next, is the OMA device management. This is probably our most successful enabler that we've created, and it's only part of a subset of a wider range of specifications. We have over 1.4 billion with a B implementations of the firmware update management object technology. This is amazing success for us as an organization, and if only we could achieve the same with the rest of our specs. But this is simply just a huge figure of success. So, but with the success comes also challenges. By the time we'd progressed from pre-2002 to 2005, we'd arrived at a situation where we had, thanks to Ferapolis, the staff and the portal, but we also had well-established processes. We were generating lots and lots of nice specifications. OMA was still growing. Our meetings were well-intended, and we still had a significant part of the value chain taking part. This was excellent news. But with this excellent news, as Mike Weers was pointing out earlier on, there are also conflicts. We had stakeholders from across the value chain, but these different stakeholders had different objectives. They had different business models. They had different priorities. They had different views of what services were. They had different timelines in which they wanted to achieve them. Also, we had differing views in terms of what a spec should contain. There were some companies that felt that we should have highly polished, many options stacked specifications, whereas other members were suggesting that we should have tighter specs, smaller specs, fewer options, faster time to market. All of this raised conflict, and of course we had to resolve this in the way we worked. But since then, things have moved on. We've moved on from 2.5G to 3G, and the World Wide Web has appeared, as was highlighted. But things have also changed even more significantly since then. In 2007, as we've seen in some of the previous presentations, the smartphones began to arrive. The advance of the applications, which was taking the service paradigm to a different ballpark. In other words, we were trying to support one area to enable our services, and suddenly they popped up somewhere else. We had to identify how we could support the developer community, and we put some programs into place. And one of this was the identification that we needed to have an API program so that developers could see the APIs which provide an access to the underlying OMA-enabled functionality implemented in the devices and the networks. And then by 2008, wow, things started to go wrong. The economic crisis hit not only the financial industry, but then it spread to companies and it spread to the telco industry as well. And some of this is still going on. We're still seeing some of the repercussions of this. 2008 is still here in 2012. We've seen many company consolidations, many restructurings, bankruptcies, cost-cutting, travel restrictions, and all of these have had an impact on OMA membership, the number of delegates, and the amount of work that OMA can do. But as Fred was pointing out, we didn't just sit there and watch this train rapidly hurtle towards us. We addressed the impact of this, we changed processes, and we still ensured that our membership could participate and be active in our technical standards activity. One of the things which is key to us and is part of our mission statement is interoperability. It's very often it's assumed that it works from an OMA perspective because it's part of our mission statement. And we are a horizontal organization. In other words, we provide enablers which support the vertical industries. And it's very important, therefore, if we portray ourselves as a horizontal organization, providing that those specifications, that we provide the interoperability. We used to communicate this well. We used to advise the industry. We had an extensive speaker program. And I think we decided too soon that we'd done the job of communicating, and several years ago we stopped our communicating as well as we had done in the past. And looking back, this was a mistake. So what we're doing is now addressing that communications gap, realizing that this should have been continued. We've making further extensive outreach, as Fred was pointing out earlier on. We're developing an extensive set of speaker engagements, and that's already up and running, and we'll be developing further. And we're also making major investments in our communications and marketing expertise. As some of you have seen, we have a new marketing director and a communications director to help with that outreach, to make ourselves more visible externally, to communicate the skill set that OMA has, to advise the industry of what we have achieved and what we will achieve in the future. But as Jari was pointing out, that thing called the World Wide Web is out there. And that World Wide Web is having a major impact on our industry. We haven't finished. The advance of the smartphones and applications has completely changed the landscape. And we need to address this. We just cannot stand still and hope that it goes away. It's not going to go away. It's going to get bigger, it's going to become more evolved, and it's going to become more significant. So the Internet of Everything just underlines that we're going to see more mobile devices. We already see more mobile devices than computers. Smartphones will soon begin to outsell feature phones. Mobile data usage is increasing, will continue to increase, and the rate of increase will accelerate. We're going to see a proliferation of connected devices. Tablets is just an example. There's going to be more and more. M2M is another area which we've identified as well. Users are going to demand, as Philip was saying earlier on, doesn't matter what device you have, the user wants the same ubiquitous access to his or her services. Doesn't matter whether on the train, at home, in the car, mobile, using a mobile phone or a PC, they want access to those services. And the Internet is advancing and potentially making that more and more widespread access. But OMA has the expertise to address this. We're bearer agnostic. We support the different environments in which these services can be received and consumed and accessed. We have an extensive API program which is enhancing and developing more and more. We have interoperability as one of our core themes. We have many large parts of the value chain involved, engaged, and contributing in OMA. And we have worldwide membership, as highlighted by Mike Weir's travel program a few moments ago. So we need to address our future needs, which means that we need to address the services, the applications, and the impacts they have. Developers and enticing and working with the developer communities. We need to make sure that developers understand that what we're doing and how we can support them. We need to be very careful, as was being highlighted earlier on, about the impacts on networks of applications on mobile phones. If we kill the ability to use mobile networks by having selfish over-signaling and over-data using applications, and then the user seeing the impact in terms of slow response time or congestion in the network, is going to kill that mobile community. We need to address that. We've had contributions made, or rather presentations made to the board, and will be made in the technical plenary on Friday. We need to address this as a key aspect of OMA's future development activity. Security. Not only do we have it as core as part of the networks, but we need to make that core to the applications. The user must be able to have confidence not only in the applications being secure, but also the data and privacy of that data on the devices. Too often it's taken for granted that it can be freely available to some applications or freely uploaded without the user's consent. We must support that in some way or another. And we must embrace the World Wide Web. We must make it part of our development program. We must support the World Wide Web activities, as Jari was saying. We must make it part and core to our future standards activity. We've identified vertical markets. And some of the key ones, such as e-health, the automated home, energy, transport, and so on, they're going to become increasingly important. And by providing horizontal interoperable enablers, we can help those markets become much more successful. Innovators. I can't recall who referred to innovators. I think it was Fred. We need to bring more of them in. We want them to come in with their ideas and stimulate standardization activity within OMA instead of going and doing it somewhere else. So by having them come to OMA, we can then encourage other members to contribute and follow. We cannot continue, or rather we cannot presume that we know everything. We must cooperate with other SDOs. We must make sure that we're part of a larger set of the standards ecosystem. We must look at potentially looking at further affiliations into OMA, potentially mergers, perhaps even consolidation. Who knows? But we must make sure that we look at the rest of the landscape and make sure that OMA evolves and modifies as it considers appropriate to ensure that we can continue to support the services industry. And capitalize on the common interest between these fora to support the markets that we're targeting. And markets is the key word. We must continue to listen to the market, we must continue to deliver to the market, and we must continue to deliver to the market in the right time frame. If we take too long to develop applications or services, they'll be ignored. That market window is being missed. If we don't listen to the market's requirements, what we deliver will be ignored because somebody else is delivering what the market wants. So the market is key to ensuring our success. So some final closing comments. The past 10 years have been experience. I certainly remember some of the people in this room who have lots of grey hairs, how we were trying to create the organization and determine how it would work and what would achieve. That I would not have believed 10 years ago that we would be here now having this discussion. I'm very impressed by what we have achieved. But what is key is that 10 years ago was very different. The world that we had then in terms of low data rates, feature phones, no interoperability, lack of coordination, fragmented industry, that's gone. We're now in a situation where we, just like any other organization, must evolve, we must adapt, we must meet the challenges ahead of us, because if we don't, we'll be history. So I therefore challenge our members to meet these challenges and look at how we need to change and evolve to meet the future. Thank you.